Thanks for pressing play. This episode of Legends and Losers is brought to you by our good friends at Oracle NetSuite. Check out netsuite.com/legends to turbocharge your growth today. On this episode, the amazing Matt Cubbler and his life of service. We talk about how he was arrested as a teenager and went on to serve in the U.S. military, specifically the Army, how he became a police officer, a SWAT cop, why he answered the call to become one of America's first Air Marshals after the horrible attacks on 9/11, how the death of his autistic brother changed his life, why he's now become an entrepreneur, a speaker, and an author, and how his story of struggle and triumph will leave you changed. All right. The Ramones said, hey ho, let's go. And Tom Waits said, fishing for a good time starts with throwing in your line. And we're going to try to do both. Welcome, my legendary friends, to an outstanding episode of Legends and Losers. Matt Cubbler is an amazing guy, an inspiring guy, a guy who's had an incredible life of service. And I was really stoked to talk to him, and I think you're going to love this conversation. Now, my dear friend Heather Clancy and I, it is almost go time for our new book, Niche Down. If you want to get a copy of the foreword written by Hal Elrod, go to nichedownbook.com and subscribe, and we will send you the incredible foreword written by Hal Elrod, the amazing author of Miracle Morning. As well, I wanted to alert you to something very cool. Our good friends at Sequoia Capital, who you may know, probably know, one of the top venture capital firms in the world, one of the leaders in Silicon Valley. They have a brand new newsletter out, and it's actually really awesome. And I'd encourage you to check it out at sequoiacap.com/newsletter and subscribe. You'll love it. Now, speaking of grow time, our friends at Oracle NetSuite want to help you turbocharge your growth. They are offering you, our listeners, a 1-hour growth review with an expert in your industry. Is your cash flowing in the right direction? Is your monthly burn rate as low as you can get it? Do you know which products are your best sellers, which have the best margins? Are you doing the kind of analysis and reporting you want to do on what's working in your business, what's not working in your business? And are you selling in an omni-channel way across social, mobile, the web, and so forth? With NetSuite, omni-channel commerce is possible. You can build a super responsive, device-optimized digital shopping experience that displays beautifully across smartphones, tablets, laptops, desktops, etc. With NetSuite, you'll only have one platform instead of maintaining multiple fragmented systems and user experiences that will help turbocharge your growth in an omni-channel way in this new world. So, check them out. NetSuite, they're number one in cloud ERP. They're the complete platform for growth. netsuite.com/legends today. All right. Well, as you well know, we aim to have real, no bullshit conversations about how to design a legendary business and a legendary life. And we have that today with Officer Matt Cubbler. He has served the United States honorably in our military and our Army specifically as an Air Marshal, as a SWAT cop, and he's an author, he's a speaker, and he's an entrepreneur. He's led an incredible life. So if you want all of his background, go to legendsandlosers.com, check out the show notes for this episode. You'll also be able to track Matt on the interweb, track him down if you want to get a hold of him. And now here he is, the incredible Matt Cubbler.
We got hired. Everybody was still very afraid of terrorism and it happening again. And so we were kind of like the untouchable counter-terrorist covert operatives at the moment. And so we were allowed to, dress how we wanted, grow our hair out, get facial hair. The rule was, somebody breathes heavy on the cockpit door, they're getting 6 rounds in their back. So that was kind of the mentality we had because we didn't want to have another 9/11. And that was when we were under the FAA, which is the agency that originally had the Sky Marshal program before it got turned into the U.S. Federal Air Marshal program.
And is that under Homeland Security now, or where is that?
It is now. And it switched when TSA was created. And that was actually the downfall of the agency when they created TSA, because then there was a lot of bureaucratic nightmares that came with that. What happened was everybody that was ready to retire from the Secret Service retired and then got rehired under the Federal Air Marshal Service and became supervisors and ran the agency, and they were double dipping. And the mission of the Secret Service and the mission of the Federal Air Marshal Program were two different missions. The Secret Service is they're more proactive in the fact that they're visible. They're all walking with the president. They have earpieces on. They have little lapel pins that signify things, and so everybody knows who they are, and they're there as a deterrent. Whereas the Air Marshals were it's unseen, unheard, unafraid is our motto. So we weren't meant to be out in the front, and unfortunately, that's the way it got led.
It is a curious decision. Do you know why that was the case, as opposed to making you guys visible when you're on a plane? Is it the elements of surprise, or is it more to it than that?
No, it's way more than that. But and I get that asked that question a lot. So imagine, if you think about it, there was, and I don't know the exact number. It's classified, the number of actual air marshals that were hired when I got hired after 9/11. Somewhere around 4,000 is the number. There's 30,000 flights a day. So if a terrorist decides, they're not booking round trip tickets, they're paying in cash, they're buying one-way tickets, and if we're visible and we're known, and it turned into that, it became almost like they were parading us around in the airports and on the airplanes. I had old ladies grab my arm as they're walking boarding the plane, thanking me for being there. So they knew we were on there, and for me that was very disheartening because first of all, I wanted to be the one that took a terrorist out, number one. And number two, I don't want that terrorist going, I'm not getting on that flight because there's two air marshals. I'm going to go on one that doesn't have one because there's 26,000 other flights I can choose from.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that was sort of the obvious one. I mean, it's great you're a deterrent for the people on that flight, but what about the rest of us? And obviously, don't tell me things you shouldn't tell me. And I don't know what you shouldn't tell me, so I'm going to ask you some
Trust
stuff.
Me. Ask me what you want, and I'll tell you if I can answer.
Yeah. Were there situations where you're the only on one flight, or is there always more than one of you, or is there? How does that part of it work?
Yeah, we worked in teams, and then within the teams we had partners.
Yeah.
So we always worked at least in pairs at a minimum.
So minimum, there were two marshals on the flight.
Mm-hmm. And depending on the type of flight, depending on the threat level on that flight, depending on the distance of the flight, that variable would change, but never less than two. Yeah.
And I assume you weren't always necessarily sitting up at the front of the bus near the cockpit, or is that wrong? Are you always near the front?
In the beginning, it was always near the front because the threat is not based on really the passengers or the crew or the air marshal. It's what is the plane potentially going to go flying into. So the goal was no one could ever get the cockpit. So there was a hierarchy of threat, and number one was the cockpit. So the closer we were to the cockpit, the easier it was to defend.
And today, excuse my ignorance, Matt, but where did we land? Haha, pun intended. With pilots and co-pilots carrying firearms, does that happen much?
Yeah, I don't think it's. When they created the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program, it was. I was against it, even though we were the ones doing the training for them, and it's been proven to be kind of a reckless. But I guess at the end of the day, the guy's flying a whatever how many ton plane. If he has a bad day, we're all screwed anyways.
Yeah, so, no kidding.
So whether he's got a bazooka or a tank or a gun, or it doesn't really matter, because if he's flying the airplane, he's kind of in control of the 230 passengers anyway. So I guess in reality, having a gun on the plane isn't any worse than having a guy that's having a bad day at the controls. So, but there has been incidents where, pilots were drunk showing up and they were FFDOs, and where they left their gun at the hotel or in the bathroom at the airport or whatever the case might be. So, but that happens, I guess.
Yeah. And so, obviously, on the vast majority of flights, suddenly nothing happens, right?
Yeah, it's 99% boredom, 1% adrenaline. So,
And so, what are the weird shit on flights that you can tell me about?
Well, I mean, some things I can't talk about, but some of the funny stuff. I mean, Vegas flights were always fun.
Yeah.
There's always somebody that wants to get up and open the cockpit door. Because they're
Even in a post 9/11 world, they're still too hammered to realize that's a bad idea.
Yeah, and we try to we talk to the flight crew before flights, especially when we're doing the Vegas to and from, and say, listen, try to use as much discretion as you possibly can before calling us in, because if it's just a drunk guy that just needs to be persuaded back to a seat, then I don't think that's necessarily a reason why to get the Air Marshal activated. So, but there were times that we had to do that, and most of them was because they were combative and were fighting with the flight crew or whatever the case might be. But for the most part, it was mostly just drunk and disorderly stuff, and a couple medical emergencies where we had to get activated just because we were first responders, and then there were some other things that I can't talk about that were pretty interesting, but unfortunately, they're not necessarily public knowledge. So
yeah,
they keep them that way.
Did you ever have to pull your service weapon?
No. A couple guys in my office did. They were the first ones to do so, to actually not fire, but they had to draw their weapons out. And it was, it turned into a big ordeal in the Philadelphia area shortly after. It was like in mid 2002, I would assume. But no, we had people taken into custody once we landed. There were definite people of interest that we knew were on planes, that we didn't have enough on to not let them on the plane, but we had to make sure that if they were on that plane, that they were not doing anything out of the ordinary. So there's a lot of that stuff that happens behind the scenes that, it's probably better that the public isn't necessarily aware of everything that happens, even though we're in a I need to know everything world.
No, I'm glad we don't know much about you guys. Right? Because if we did, it would be a problem. Like I think there's some stuff we know too much about.
Oh, I agree. I think it's I think it can be. I tell my mother this. My mother is a retired English teacher, and God bless her, but she's suffering with Alzheimer's now. But I used to tell her when I was in the military, when I was doing Army intelligence, or when I was a cop doing SWAT stuff, that I didn't want her to truly know what the world was like, because she lived in a bubble. She thinks everything is rainbows and unicorns and that everybody gets along, and that JFK really lived in Camelot, and like she just lived in this world of Macbeth and Shakespeare, and life was just great. And I'm okay with that. There's certain people that need to live in the world that doesn't exist. And I like the one that I live in, where I get to know what's going on and I get to be part of the solution. Yeah.
So, I mean, what a life of service. You've been drawn to all of these superhero service jobs.
Yeah. I've had a little bit of a hero complex, I guess, since I was...
I didn't mean that at all in a negative way. I think it's amazing. I mean, you grew up and kind of figured out how to be Batman. You want to rid the world of bad guys.
What I learned early on was that my protective gene was strong. That with my brother being autistic and stuttering and living in public housing in the 1970s and 80s necessarily wasn't the easiest place to have those issues that my brother had, and protecting him was kind of something I really took pride in doing, and it just sort of grew from there. And I always found myself sticking up for people in school and stuff like that, and I always wanted to be a cop. I had a cop. I actually got arrested when I was in high school, and the cop actually became my mentor instead of putting me in his system, and he changed the direction of my life when I was in 10th grade. So
what happened there, man?
Some stupid, property destruction, just being an idiot. And
you were how old again?
Like 15, 16.
Yeah.
And I had sold drugs in high school and smoked a lot of weed, and but I was a good kid. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I was a good person. I guess it's hard.
I would never hold smoking weed against you.
Right. Well, yeah. And listen, I enjoyed smoking weed when I was in high school, but when you have to go in the military and you have to make a choice on a career path, mine didn't include weed. So
Not so much on the weed in the military, are they?
yeah, or police, they frown upon it. So, but I was a little bit of an entrepreneur in high school. I had a term paper writing business. I read one book from the time I was in ninth grade until I wrote my book in 2000. Began writing it in 2002.
Did you say you had read one book?
One book, but I wrote probably 100 term papers on books that I never read. I would just read the first opening, the preface and the conclusion, and then the first page of each chapter, and then just bullshit the rest of the way. But I was good, and I could guarantee grades.
So wait a minute, slow down. So you would read the front and the back of the book, the table of contents, the first page of each chapter, and then based on that, people would pay you to write their term paper about that book that you'd never read, and you got them good marks.
Yeah, they didn't know I didn't read it.
I understand that wasn't part of the product pitch.
I wasn't marketing that. That wasn't. But yeah,
but that's what happened.
Yeah, and
that's fucking hysterical.
I was good at it, and I enjoyed it. And so I had that little business going on. Then I stole 2,000 hall passes, and learned how to forge 3 different teacher signatures. So I had $2 a hall pass. When people were late for class, they would come get me out of class, and I'd write them a hall pass for $2.
So you had a budding criminal empire starting as a young teenager.
I was definitely on the fence there, but my heart was always. I think I always just wanted to know what the other side was like. Like I just wanted to know what the draw to doing that kind of stuff was, and the ease of it was exciting, and the financial benefit of it was exciting. But there was no long term. It was all it's like drugs. You're high for the time you're high, and then when you're not high, you're like, crap, I'm not high anymore. And for me, doing good things had a longer high last for me, and having a purpose that was driven by helping others succeed, protecting. It seemed to last longer inside of me.
Yeah,
and that's kind of was I think what other than getting arrested was the changing point for me. And when Chris Carlisle's name is, and still my mentor. He helped me get my first cop job, but he was the cop that arrested me, and he helped me identify that in me, and show me that while I might be good at those things I was doing to make money in high school, it wasn't necessarily who I was. So,
and Chris taught you that.
Yeah, because he was a former Marine, and we always played. I grew up in an urban town, and a lot of basketball courts outside, and basketball was the sport in our town, and so he was always there playing basketball anyways, and so that was kind of how we connected. And then when I got in trouble, I had to go with him every day to go play basketball, even if it was just me and him. We'd play, roughhouse or horse or something, just to kill time, and then for him to get into my head and into my soul. So that worked well.
And how old is Chris today?
Chris has got to be, he's in his 70s. He's retired. He ended up becoming the chief of police in our town. And
no kidding.
Yeah. And I worked in the neighboring jurisdiction to where I grew up, and he was the commander of the SWAT team that when I became a SWAT officer. And so
he was your SWAT commander.
Yeah. Yeah. So
what was that like? How many years later would that have been?
So I was about 25. So probably 10 years later, 11 years later.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So tell me a little bit about that.
About being on the SWAT team?
Yeah, well, about working for Chris and how you went from, how he helped mentor you to go from being, a 15-year-old pain in the ass to a 25-year-old man committed to service on the SWAT team working for him.
He's a guy that whenever I was home on leave from the Army, I would go see, and he showed genuine interest. And when I got out of the Army in '93, there was an opportunity to get hired in a small town where I live now. And he helped me get that job. There's no doubt in my mind he helped me get that job. Even though I did well in the testing and in the interviewing, I think if there was ever a measuring stick that I needed to have placed against me, he helped make sure that I finished on top. And then I left that department 3 years later and went to the neighboring jurisdiction. And that's when I joined the SWAT team. And, having him, it was funny. I'm going through the interviews and I was still, and I'm still an ass. I still have my own set of assholeness that I've lived with my entire life that comes out frequently, and he knows it, and he was able to utilize that in ways that allowed me to be very good at SWAT. I was always very much in charge, even when I wasn't. I was cultivating our raid plans and the op plans when the other guys were trying to do it, and I would get, no, we're not doing it that way. We're going to do it this way, and he allowed me to breathe. I guess that's really what he did. He allowed me to breathe and cultivated that, and I think it ruffled a couple feathers because people knew of our relationship, but ultimately it helped me grow into the cop that I became after 25 years. So. But having him there was instrumental in my life, and he was at my wedding. I mean, he's just an amazing guy.
That guy. Yeah, he decided to be that guy to make a difference in a young man's life, and
he didn't have to.
Yeah, but look at what happened, right? Yeah. And I hear this sometimes. People say, "Oh, it must be nice to be a self-made man," and I understand the compliment, and I always appreciate it as I think most people mean it. And sometimes I don't bother saying anything, but because I don't want them to feel bad about the compliment, but I don't feel that way at all because right. I'm the furthest thing from self-made. The people who put Humpty Dumpty back together again and still do, right? Like, and so it's just an extraordinary thing when one human being, for no reason at all, bets on another human being like that.
It's fundamentally made me who I am. That the one act of kindness of, and like I said, we were poor, and I had a brother who had autism and a mother who had 3 jobs and dad who left. And I didn't have a whole lot going on in my life as far as people that were influential, especially in the adult level and especially male adults. And for him to put himself out there and force me to hear him at a time when I wasn't listening to anything. And the way that he was able to get me to believe in myself and believe in what I was potentially capable of doing. And then throughout my life, I would go to him and say, I'm having an issue with this, or I'm thinking about this, or I want to change to this. And he would always give me sage advice. And throughout my life, I've been mentoring kids, and it's because of him, because I want to be able to do that for somebody else.
Do it
without, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
isn't that funny how that works, right? How I don't know how you can be a person. If you're a person who has been supported, has been given a lot of help by a lot of people, or even a lot of help by a few people, I don't know how you don't have this massive drive to give that back.
You'd be broken inside if you didn't. Like
it's the greatest thing in my life. I mean, other than the direct relationships with the people I love the most and so forth, and being with them, that's a big part too. But the ability to make a contribution to other people. I don't know. That's all I got now.
Well, that in life, if you think about it, and maybe the conversation will go in that direction. If it does, it's great. But I went through a real dark period.
Any direction we want, man.
Well, so in order to understand drive, like you brought up that word, and what is inside of you to give back and to be that person in someone else's life. And my brother died in '89, a month before I went in the Army. The year I graduated, a month after I graduated, actually.
How old was he, Matt?
I was 18. He was 21.
Yeah.
And he died in a car accident. And that was the worst day of my life still to this day. So, and it crushed me. And it crushed me in such a way because, I told you about all my stupidity and decisions I made and things I did. And while I was a good brother and I protected him, I did a lot of stupid shit. And if I couldn't come to terms in my head as to why God would take somebody who did absolutely nothing wrong in this world and brought nothing but joy and love into the world. Why would he be taken? And so I spent a long time, 13 years to be exact, killing myself inside intentionally, and putting myself in positions.
What do you? I hate to interrupt you, Matt, but what do you mean killing yourself inside intentionally?
Drinking, guilt, anger. I was incapable of love. Incapable. And that, if you think about, I found love in physical affection, but I couldn't feel love. You know what I'm saying? Like with my wife, if I was physically with my wife, I felt as if we were connecting, but outside of that, there was nothing. I had a child, my daughter, my oldest, who when she was born, I felt nothing. In my brain, I said, you're my daughter and I love you and I would die for you. But in my heart, I had nothing. And I knew it. And I didn't know why. And I didn't know how to fix it. And I didn't know what I was going to do to change that.
Did it feel like something was wrong? Did you feel like it was wrong? Or did you just feel like, I don't feel anything and fuck it?
No, I was distraught over the guilt of how can I not love my daughter? How can I not love my wife? And my best friend, who's a cop as well. And I'm like, dude, I'm broken. I said, there's something fucking wrong with me. And he's like, it's just postpartum, or, it's hard being a new father and you got a lot of things going on and it's stress. And there were so many different answers that were given to me. But at the end of the day, I was just still brokenhearted over my brother dying and severely pissed off at God and guilt ridden over the fact that, the day my brother died, there was an option for me to take him to work and pick him up. And I didn't. And
so you were just stuck there.
Yeah. I just couldn't get out. I couldn't forgive. I couldn't forget. I couldn't do any of those things. And to sit here, my daughter's 20 years old. She's beautiful. She's 20 in college and All-American swimmer 4.0. And
what's her name, Matt?
Rebecca. And she is the pride of my life. And I can't imagine how I could not have loved her. And it crushes my soul every time I tell that story when I'm on a stage, because it is one of the most embarrassing, heartbreaking parts of my life, because I couldn't. But once I was able to finally say it, that's why it almost liberated me. And
that's why being that you were still not over the loss of your brother and you were mad about it.
But I couldn't identify it. Like I knew it, but I couldn't understand how to get out of it. That, there was no way.
How did you unpack all this? Did you go to therapy? What did you do?
No, I wrote a book, and it was spurned. My son was born in 2002, 4.5 years after my daughter was born. And I didn't want to have another kid. And my wife convinced me that we needed to have another kid, and I trusted her. And knew we were having a boy, and I had just gotten hired by the Air Marshals when we first found out she was pregnant. And I got back from my training a month before he was born. And when he was born, and I named him after my brother, which is significant. And when I saw him for the first time, I felt a twinge of something. And I couldn't call it love. It wasn't like a euphoria. I wasn't overwhelmed with emotion, but I felt something in my heart. And I recognized it, but I didn't know what to do with it. And then about 3 or 4 months later, we had people over at our house, and it's typical of people coming over to bring gifts for new babies, and the guys, the husbands of the women that come, we all sit in the kitchen and drink beer, and everybody else is in the other room.
Anybody bring you some good cigars? Are you supposed to bring cigars?
Yeah, I'm not a cigar guy, but I'm a Scotch guy. So
okay, well there you go.
Yeah. So my grandmother tells me that I needed to be in the room with everybody, which I thought was odd. And she hands me this big box, and I open this box, and in it is a quilt. And
quilt.
A quilt, yeah. And I don't know if we don't know each other, but I'm not a quilt guy.
I wouldn't have pegged you as a quilt guy, Matt. So I'm not a quilt guy either, just for the record.
For the record.
And I have nothing against quilts.
Yeah. So I folded it back up and I put it back in a box and I handed it back to her and I said, "This is probably for Lauren." And she looks at me, and my grandmother, when she wants me to do something, I don't mess around. She's got, I'm one of the 3 women on this planet I'm afraid of. And she hands it back to me and says, "Look at it." Well, the week my brother died, my parents were on vacation, and I was staying with friends, and my brother was staying with my grandmother. And so she was doing his laundry the whole time.
Grandma was.
Yeah. And the week he died, and for whatever reason, for 13 years, she kept all his clothes in a Ziploc bag in the attic and turned all his clothes into the quilt for my son. And to this day, I get a lump in my throat. That moment was my life-saving moment. And I had to recuse myself, and I went down to my office in the basement of our house, and it was about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and I sat down and I typed memories about my brother, and I just sat there holding that quilt, and I let everything out. And I came up about 7:30 in the morning, and our basement door, it was in the kitchen, access was in the kitchen, and you open that door, and the window that's over the sink is where the sun comes up. And I saw the sun coming through the window, and for the first time in 13 years, I saw color. I saw each ray of sunlight. I saw the reflections. I saw everything, and it was like everything in the world had been lifted off of my shoulders. And I never thought that's what I needed, but that's what I needed. I needed that gift. I needed to hold my brother one more time. And so that turned into my book, because it was 26,000 words I wrote that night. I mean, I got after it, and it turned into the book. And that book is my dedication to my brother. It is my my history book. It's my my way of sharing my brother with people like you, with my kids. And growing up, we didn't have friends. He never had anybody come to our house and say, "Come out and play," or call our house or anything like that. So this is a way that he gets friends. There's thousands of people now that know my brother and call him his friend. So that, to me, listen, I'm not the brightest guy on the planet, but I'll walk in front of a bus for just about anybody, and I would do anything to share my brother's story. So that's that.
I'm having a hard time keeping my shit together. I don't even know what to say. I find there's a lot of humanity in what you say. Yeah. Sorry
about that. I didn't mean to bring it down on that, but that's...
No. You didn't bring it down on anything, man. No. I'm stoked to have this conversation with you. Absolutely stoked to have this conversation with you. I will forever be fascinated with moments of truth in people's lives, and what they do and how they handle them, and how how our life can tilt in one direction or another, and what makes people in particular stand up or get crushed in moments of truth. So this is a conversation I love having with you.
I'll do it every day, and that's the honest to God's truth. I will bare my soul every day if I have to, because to me, being able to tell that story is validation. Life is it's a sequence of events that are not individually separated. They're all tied together. And everything that I've done in my life, every accomplishment I've had, every cool thing I've ever done, all go back to the life I had with my brother, and the relationship we had, and the darkness I went through after he died, and then the joy and love and passion and spirituality and emotion that I have now in my life is all because of all of that. And everything that I aspire to be is because of that journey. And I embrace it now. And I was running from it for a long time and ignoring it and hiding it and squashing it in my chest. And now I can stand in front of 1,000 people and share that story and cry on stage if I need to, because I don't care.
Well, and it's a very powerful thing when we make the decision that we're not going to be a victim, that we're going to actually choose our life as it is.
Yeah.
Because if you're able to say, this is my life, and choose this life, then you take the power back, of course, right? You're now in control of your life again. And it changes that whole, God, why did you do this to me thing, right?
Yeah.
Is that how it felt for you, or how did it feel?
Initially, it was just a release of it was a forgiveness, really, is what it started with. And
who are you forgiving?
Myself and God.
Yeah.
I wasn't mad at my brother for, he didn't do anything wrong. He had a medical something happen. He was unconscious before the accident. So there was and to think about, back in the 80s, my brother stuttered more than any person I've ever heard in my life. And he had autism on the range where he could memorize the Bible, but couldn't tell you how many pennies were in a dollar. So I don't know if today he would have gotten a driver's license, but he was the best driver I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it reminds me of like the Rain Man scene where he's like, I'm a very good driver. My dad lets me drive in the driveway on Saturdays. That was my brother.
Yeah.
and
I forgot that line. That's so great.
Yeah. So now I cry every time I see that movie too. But for me, when I wrote the book and the book became a real thing and I could hold it in my hand and I could show it to somebody, and I could share that with somebody, because it's the writing part. I wrote it, started writing in 2002. I published it, self-published in 2006. For me, it was about, now what is my mission? I wrote the book. What do I do with the book? And my mom, as an English teacher, told me when I called her after the morning I wrote all those words, and I said, Mom, last night I wrote 26,000 words about Andy. What do I do? She said, you write a book. And I said, well, Mom, I haven't read a book since Animal Farm in 9th grade. I'm not sure I'm properly qualified to write a book. And she said, well, maybe you should start. And one of the luxuries of being an Air Marshal is you get to read a lot of books on airplanes and sitting in airports waiting for your next flight. So
I assume you're not staring down the aisle at all times waiting.
Yeah, I'm not a centurion. No.
Yeah, you're going to wait to at least hear a noise, right?
Yeah, you wait until somebody goes by and you see what they're doing. You look up, see if they're in the bathroom. Okay, go back to your book. So once I had the book and I had an idea that I wanted to share that, and it wasn't just to write a book to have the book, that I realized it was something that I could take out and share with people. That sort of began this journey that I'm still on today. And,
and this is not an original idea, because many other people are starting to say it. But I'm kind of believing it myself as I'm hard at work on my second book, which is, everybody should write a book, man. Like, I'm stoked you wrote a book, right? Look at what it did for you.
It was amazing.
And there's something about writing a book, because there's no way you can write a book, particularly your first book. And I don't know, maybe it's true for your 101st book. What do I know? But here's what I do know, and I'm sure I want to check this out with you. You can't write a book about something you're not insanely passionate about and driven to write, because you're not writing this book because you think you're going to be the next Stephen King or whoever.
Yeah, I don't do anything, period, unless I have a passion and a burning desire for it, because I've wasted a lot of time doing a lot of different things throughout my life that were neither beneficial financially, beneficial time-wise, or beneficial to my health. And I realized that I only have so many minutes on this planet. And, the saying, your life is made up of 2 dates and a dash. What are you going to do with that dash? I live by that.
I've been hearing that everywhere now. I don't know where I heard it first. It wasn't that long ago.
I heard it from Tebow when I was his bodyguard. That was one of his quotes.
That was him?
Yeah, I don't think he came up with it, but that's where I first heard it.
Yeah, no, I can't remember where I heard it, but I've only heard it in the last few months, and now I seem to hear it everywhere. And there's something cool about, at the end of your life, what's left is 2 dates and a dash. And, how's it going with your dash? Like, I don't know. There's something about that. So, well, maybe we could go there for a sec. So what's it like to be a bodyguard of a high profile, in this case, athlete? Yeah.
Most of the time it sucks. I'm not going to lie. I'm not.
Well, why does it? Everybody, like, they make movies about it and shit. And
it's most of the time you're for hire. Like there's your event driven or moment driven is why they hire you, because you're referred by somebody else. There's no real connection there. I've done hundreds of famous people with bodyguarding, and none of them would I even be able to contact today and say, hey, what's up? But Tebow's family, when he was a sophomore in college, took a liking to me, and I had done security for him once, and they just sort of were like, we want you to be our guy. And up until his fame got bigger than my stature, and that wasn't his doing. This was just the process of becoming famous. You get agencies, that talent agencies, and this agency and that agency, and they all have their own bodyguard people. And unfortunately, once his name, he signed his name on the dotted line to be represented by them, they take care of all aspects of that, and I wasn't needed anymore. Doesn't mean he doesn't care for me and I don't care for him. He's one of the greatest human beings I've ever met in my life. And as a grown-ass man, I learned a lot from, a 21, 22, 23-year-old kid who.
What did you learn from him?
His humility, his ability to never waver from who he is. He's never once wavered from who he is. Everything you see on TV or in the media, behind closed doors, he's even better. And it's he doesn't have a persona. That's who. No, that's who he is. He is literally the greatest human being. Like, he doesn't cuss, he doesn't drink, he doesn't talk ill about anybody. He literally is just a genuinely great guy. And his family is amazing. The work they do in the Philippines with their mission and their orphanage, and this work he's doing through his foundation and his national night, it's like a prom night that he does once a year, and like 60 different countries they have proms for special needs kids. And it's just, he does amazing work while still trying to prove to everybody that he deserves to be a professional athlete. And trust me, he's going to make Major League Baseball. He's going to be in the pros. So
he's going to make it in baseball.
Yeah, he may not stick in baseball, but he'll make it to the show, because that's just who he is. He'll drive himself that
How
hard.
old would he be now?
He's 30 or 29 or 30. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But he's just a great human being, and I was very blessed to have been in his inner circle when that inner circle was small, and I'm not now. There's a whole different circle there, but I know that I can call his mom and dad tomorrow and they'll answer.
So what's involved with keeping a high profile athlete or celebrity or business person or political person safe as a frontline bodyguard?
Lots. Logistically, there's a lot that you have to plan for as far as travel arrangements, as far as travel routes, hotel, pre-planning as far as what hotel they're at. Does that hotel have security? Is there local law enforcement? Making sure they're aware, and the hotel staff, and making sure that I get to choose who I want to be in his room as far as the maid service. And there's just a lot of logistical stuff that has to happen beforehand. And then whatever the event is, you're pretty much up as long as he's awake. You're awake.
Yeah. And are you tattooed next to him?
Pretty much the whole time. Yeah. I mean, it depends on the situation, but if you're in a like an event, I'll be off in the 15 feet away from him, but off to the side, just so I can see all the angles and stuff like that. But for the most part, I mean, most of it is just to keep the ones that want to come up and get autographs that are trying to sell the autographs and are just obnoxious about it. And then there's the people that, especially a Tim Tebow, his brother Robbie, who's his manager, he's a great human being as well, but he's not Tim. So he enjoys to go out to a club and have a drink, and still very faith-based, doesn't goof off and do stupid stuff.
You can believe in God and still enjoy a scotch, can't you?
Right. So, so Robbie does. Robbie will enjoy. So, and Tim will go out with him, and they'll get like table service or something, bottle service, and I have to make sure that everything Tim gets is a sealed bottle of water. There's people want to come up and offer him, oh, here's a Coke. I don't know what's in that Coke. You're not taking anything. So, making sure
it's a lot of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, people want to see Tim, do something stupid and get it on TMZ. It's the way of the world today. So that's really just trying to keep his image intact, making sure that no one can use anything against him later on.
So it's more that and less that somebody's going to do something physically to harm him. Yeah,
very, very. I mean, he's taller than me, and we're about the same weight, but he's built like a Adonis. So I mean, there's not much that
you look like an Adonis to me, Matthew.
Thanks, pal. Appreciate that.
And
I have a couple Tebow jerseys, as you can see on the wall.
Yeah, I can see them behind you. I think it's very cool, and I love that you guys are still bros. How do you, in your mind, think about? And I want to talk about entrepreneurship in a second, and what you're up to. But if you think about law enforcement and your career of service, whether it's military, law enforcement, being a cop, being an air marshal, how do you think about all of those things? How do you compare and contrast them in your head, or do you?
No, I use them all as like resources. So like my time in the military, that was, at a very difficult point in my life, and some of the friends I made when I was in the Army are my best friends today. Actually, my best friend, who was my bunkmate for all 4 years, is coming out in a month. He doesn't know it yet. His wife's surprising him with a trip out to see me. But my military time, working Army intelligence, being able to keep secrets, being able to compartmentalize things, being able to, did like decoding and stuff like that. So I was doing analytical work for the most part. So taking USSR back then, not Russia, but the Soviet Union, and taking those foreign nations intercepts and figuring out what they're saying and where they're going to be at. And so that was stuff that I learned as far as how to use that part of my brain as an analytic side. And then when I became a cop, it was more of in the beginning, it was more might and brawn, wearing the uniform, carrying the gun, tackling guys, kicking down doors. But then as I've matured and gotten older, I've realized that I can use my brain way more than I've ever been able to use my brawn to sort of solve problems in a way that maybe I would have gone hands-on a lot sooner than I am now, because I can see the ways that I can utilize all the stuff that I've learned in my career to my benefit now.
Maybe say a little bit more about that.
Well, and I think I should probably go back a little bit. With my brother being autistic and my brother stuttering in such a fashion that he really couldn't complete sentences at all, I learned how to finish his sentences. I learned how to know exactly what he wanted when he wanted it. And at the time, I was just the little brother that was trying to help his bigger brother. And my mom would yell at me and say, he's never going to learn to speak unless you stop answering finishing his sentences. But as once you write a book and you go back through your life and you relive it again, you sort of start to put pieces together as to how things became what they are. And I'm very, very talented in human behavior and body language. Very. So much so that it's actually annoying to most people, especially my wife and kids. And, my kids can't get away with anything. And I already know ahead of time when I piss my wife off. So I can tell.
My wife is very good at letting me know. She's an incredible communicator that way.
I wish my wife would. It has to get to the very last straw before she lets me know. But throughout my career, I didn't necessarily take advantage of that skill set because I was so quick to put somebody in handcuffs, to be a little bit more hands-on, aggressive in making an arrest rather than maybe solving the problem using my mind and diffusing things when maybe I was a little quick to when something could have been handled a different way. I was usually pretty hands-on pretty quick.
Do you hear all this praise that the cop in Canada got? Remember we had this situation where the guy was running over people and he was yelling that he had a gun and he was faking that he was going for it. And do you remember? I heard this. There's tape of the cop. The guy says, "I have a gun," or "I'm going to shoot you," or something along those lines. And the cop says, I don't care, get on the ground. And so there's been a lot of praise towards this cop for not ending that guy's life. And I think about that and I go, well, I don't know. Was he being smart or stupid? I don't know I know I don't have a lens to evaluate that other than just an opinion like anyone else. When you see something like that, what does that look like through your eyes?
I've been there a few times, and I can tell you that your guys that are, and I think the guy was an older cop, if I'm not mistaken, the guy in Canada. I think he's got a few years on. I don't think he's a younger guy. I grew up in an urban environment. I did a lot of the criminal stuff that I was seeing every day. I was already well conditioned to the environment I was in. So I wasn't necessarily ever caught in this situation where I didn't expect what was happening. Does that make sense? Like I kind of knew how this was all going to play out every time I was in a situation.
So as the situation was escalating, you knew someone was going to pull a firearm on you.
Yep. And that
what's it like when someone pulls a firearm on you?
It sucks. Here's my theory on everything. If somebody pulled a gun on me and I didn't get shot, they weren't going to shoot me anyways. You know what I'm saying? If the gun came out and nothing happened, their intention wasn't to shoot me. So I've had times where I've had to discharge my firearm, and then I've had times where someone was acting in a way that could have been construed as going for a gun, or and in this guy's case, he was trying to get killed. He wanted to die. So he was doing things intentionally that he knew the furtive movement, that quick motion from his pocket or his waist out into a 3-point shooting stance would normally have someone immediately, if their weapon was drawn, pull that trigger just out of fear and adrenaline. You know, you have a sympathetic.
I would have thought even out of reflex, right? As soon as his hand goes down to where a gun might be, and to your point, I mean, that officer on the videos clearly got his weapon out, ready to go, his fingers on the trigger. You would think just as a reflex, you'd pull the trigger.
Well, if he's a well-trained officer, his fingers out of the trigger well, along the slide of the gun and not in the trigger well. And that's...
Oh, really? Even in that situation, your finger's not on the trigger?
Yep. I can pull the trigger faster than you can pull the gun. Even if my finger's on the side of the frame of the...
So, but why would your finger be on the side of the firearm as opposed to on the trigger itself?
It's a safety. It's a mental safety.
You want to have to think about moving that finger. You don't want that reflex.
Nope. Because if you aren't in 100%, it's, it goes back to everything else we talk about, being in control and having control of your life and the path you're on. I don't ever want to have a sympathetic reflex be the reason why I took somebody's life unnecessarily because I got startled.
So how do you make the decision, Matt, that you're actually going to fire that weapon?
It's very clear. It's the minute you become it, almost like you're trying to remember The Legend of Bagger Vance. It was a golf movie with Will Smith.
I remember it.
And there was a moment with, who was it? Matt Damon. Wasn't he the golfer? Who was the white golfer? I think it was Matt Damon.
I can't remember.
Well, anyways, he was telling him that he needed to focus, and all of a sudden, he's looking out. He's on the tee box, and he sees all the fans on the side, and then all of a sudden, everything narrows and everything goes away. All the noise disappears, and all he sees is the fairway. And when you are highly trained and hypervigilant, everything sort of stops around you. The silence happens, and you just see it. Everything happens almost in slow motion, and you see the hand going down, and you see the whatever's coming up, and your brain automatically determines at that moment whether or not that is threat or not a threat. And I think that cop, there's no other logical reason why he wouldn't have pulled the trigger unless that he had already had that kind of training and had that super vigilant, hyper-focused attention to every little small movement because of the situation, the gravity of it, that he was able to make that determination not to pull the trigger. But you would have found if that was a rookie or somebody with 4 or 5 years on who may not have ever been punched in the nose once in her life, he unloaded the whole clip in him, because that's just the way that law enforcement is going. And that I guess we can talk about that.
And I don't know, you tell me, you're the cop, you're the special ops cop, justified to empty the clip in him.
Well, I guess the logic is that if I'm pulling it once, I'm trying to stop the threat. So if I pull once and put it in your head and I put 9 more in your chest, does it really matter in the grand scheme of things?
Well, I don't know. I guess it depends.
Dead is dead.
You know, but here's what I know. If somebody's in my house uninvited at 3 a.m., it's going to be a very bad decision for them.
Absolutely. I'm not even, that's not even I'm not looking for anything. You're in my house.
So I'm just saying, in a situation where you decide that your life is under threat, then you do everything possible to make sure that.
Absolutely.
So,
and I think, but training comes into that, and training and experience, and I can't stress enough experience, because.
So there was something about that individual's, the asshole's behavior that cop was able to make a determination that he was kidding. He was faking.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at I watched it a few times because I thought to myself, why didn't he shoot him? Like, he's a terrorist. He just mowed over, dozens of people, and, why would you not kill that guy? Even if he didn't have the gun, you probably get away with killing that guy. Like, that's justifiable. But then I watched the cop's movements, like his body language wasn't, oh shit. It was, I got this. And he looked very confident in his body language when he was dealing with that guy. And it didn't look like he was unsure with what he was seeing. And to me, that just comes with experience, and it comes with training. So
he seemed incredibly calm.
Yes. And that comes with that when the noise stops. And I remember when I got the one.
So how do you stay calm? Is that what happens? Is that how you stay calm in that
I heard
moment?
Nothing. I didn't hear a gunshot. I didn't hear my gun go. I saw the bullets coming out of the gun, but I didn't hear my gun. Like, everything became uber focused, and there was no noise. There was no nothing. The noise just went away. And I wasn't tunnel visioned, but I knew exactly what was happening. I could tell you every round I fired, where I fired it at. There was no what just happened. And I think with that guy, it seemed like he was probably in that same mode, but didn't have to pull the trigger. So, but it's
so in your case, take me to that moment if you could.
We had a guy it was a SWAT barricaded subject, and long story short, he was firing off rounds from inside the house, lasering like police cars with the laser on his gun, and so we knew he knew where the cars were, and we were on a perimeter surrounding the house, and we were told he didn't have access.
Did he have hostage, or what was?
No, we didn't know.
He was just angry in the house shooting.
Yeah, it was definitely a suicidal barricade, but we weren't sure whether or not there's anyone else in the house. It was a pretty big house, and the people that lived there didn't really have answers. So you always have to assume there might be someone else in there. He wasn't communicating. He wasn't answering the phone. He wasn't taking our phone and talking to us. And then, we had made a request to disable all the vehicles that were in the driveway, and that request was denied by our powers that be. And
what does that mean? To shoot holes in their tires, or what?
Either that, or pull out the spark plug wires, or flatten for the tires, or whatever.
Something.
Yeah. I mean, we wouldn't be shooting them out, but there's ways that we can disable tires quietly, and we were told that wasn't necessary because that there were no keys to the vehicles accessible to this person. So. Fast forward, he comes out and gets in one of the vehicles, and it was a Humvee, and I broke cover, and he tried to run me over, and I fired I couldn't see in because there were tinted windows, and the vantage point that I had when I came out, I just saw the top of his head as he was getting into the car to wait from the doorway to where the car was. That's all I could see, and I didn't know if there was anyone else with him. And I couldn't see into the vehicle, so I tried to shoot the tires out, and I shot 4 in the right rear tire, and then 4 into the front right tire, and he took off. And because unbeknownst to me, I I don't have a Humvee. I have a, like a 83 Datsun. And, I didn't know that they had run flats. So the initial 8 rounds that I put into those tires weren't necessarily stopping the vehicle, and he takes off, and he ends up being shot and killed about 20 minutes later in a shootout by other officers who were pursuing. But the tires ended up coming off, and he was riding on the rim. So I did hit my target. Unfortunately, it just took a little while for those.
Took a while.
Yeah. But it was very quiet. Everything just got quiet. And, hindsight's 2020. I wish I would have found a way to take him out there rather than having someone else have to have that burden. But it was justified, and good guys won.
You thought maybe you could stop him without killing him, obviously.
Right. I was hoping you always hope that the sound of gunfire for somebody who's not intent on killing somebody stops them.
Right.
It stops them in their tracks. And unfortunately that didn't happen. But,
obviously there's been a ton of conversation about policing in America over the last several years. Do you have any, thoughts that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to steer you in a direction you
I'm comfortable
want to go, but what are do you have thoughts there you want to talk about?
I do. And they'll be brief. Police work today is not police work when I got hired. I was being trained by guys that were, in their 60s and 70s was when they were hired back in that era where, blue collar guys were the ones that were hired, and, former military or whatever the case might be, guys that were a little bit more meant for that kind of job. And it wasn't necessarily a high paying job, and it certainly wasn't a job that lent to stable home lives. So it wasn't always the most sought after job. Police work after about 2002 took a little bit of a change. They tried to make it more professional, and I understand why they did it, but I don't think it was done correctly. Being a cop is and will always be about working in the gray. You have to live in the gray. It can't be black and white. There's always a circumstance that changes, the letter of the law or the letter of what this says, to where you have to read it and interpret it for that moment. And that comes from people who are meant to be a cop. There's a certain personality that lends to being a good police officer. And when they professionalized it, and they increased salaries, and they mandated 4-year degrees to get hired, you took away the guys that might have really been great cops because they were driven to do that kind of work. You took them out of the mix. And especially in urban environments, and if you look in Philadelphia, no one wants to work in Philadelphia because they have crappy pay, and they're requiring college degrees, at least an associate's, to get hired. And so they're attracting people who are coming from the suburbs, who've never seen a drug dealer, never been in a fist fight, never saw a weapon, never fired a weapon. And they're now working in the Badlands of Philadelphia and making split-second decisions on life or death opportunities, and a lot of times making the wrong one. And it's not because they're racist or hateful or anything. It's because they're scared shitless, and they have no idea what they're doing in that environment. And that's a direct reflection of the practice of hiring and professionalizing.
And you also said something that I'm curious about, which is, does it make a difference when the cops live and or are from the area that they're policing?
That was almost always the case. It was almost a mandate.
Yeah.
You used to have to live within your jurisdiction. A lot of times they recruited, especially if you look at Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a city of neighborhoods, and they would hire from within their neighborhood, and you would work in that district. And it was the way you were able to police. And New York City was fantastic at it, and still is, of hiring New York City people to work in the city which they grew up in. And a lot of departments anymore, LA, is not an LA. Not everybody from LA doesn't go to work at LAPD. They hire all across the country.
Right.
To me, I think that's the system has broken down, and yes, there are probably some negatives to maybe some complacency, maybe to some corruption, because people get hired and they have histories in their neighborhood that maybe would influence decisions they make as a police officer. But I think by and large, towns are safer
Yeah, I mean, I've lived in 2 towns where the cops are locals, up in Tahoe and Truckee, and here in Santa Cruz, and you get to recognize them. You wave at them when they drive by, like they're people in your hood. And also, I don't know if you have an opinion about this. We live in an unincorporated part of the county. And so, therefore, we're protected by the sheriff. And first of all, I grew up in Canada. I thought sheriffs were just in John Wayne movies and shit. So the fact that there are sheriffs in the United States and they're called sheriffs, I just fucking, as a kid who grew up watching that cowboy shit, I love that. But anyway,
a star, and that's cool too.
I know to get to where it's all of it is awesome. Anyway, the thing I like about the sheriff, of course, is you vote for the sheriff, and our sheriff's name is, I forget his first name, but his last name is Hart, which is kind of an interesting name for a sheriff. But here's what I know about Sheriff Hart. He likes being Sheriff Hart.
Yeah.
And so I think voting for the sheriff is a very powerful thing. It's a very interesting thing, something I'd never experienced before. There's a direct line between the community and law enforcement. And I think that's different than working for a mayor. But I'm just a dumb civilian. Does any of this, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, we don't have, so in Pennsylvania, we have the most police departments of any state in the country.
Wow.
We have, I don't know, it's a ridiculous number, like 600 some police departments in Pennsylvania. Every little borough, township, village has their own municipality, and they have their own center government. They have
so less sheriffs.
There is no sheriff. So
no sheriffs in Pennsylvania.
No, we have our county sheriff's departments they're clerical. So they work for the courts. They do
coroner work probably.
Yeah, they do civil stuff, but they're not like the sheriffs out in most of the other states.
How interesting.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different out our way, but like my department, I work in a town called Collegeville, and it's a little borough, 1.6 square miles. We have 5,000 residents. We have a liberal arts college, and I have 8 guys. That's it. And we know everybody in town. I go to the barber. It was the mayor, and
So when you pull someone over, you know that person.
Absolutely. Yep. And working in a college town has its own highs and lows, and it's a very small, sleepy town. I took that job when I got out of the Air Marshals because I honestly didn't want to be a cop again. But the chief of police is one of my best friends, and a position became open, and he offered it to me, and I took it because I needed to come home and be a dad and a husband again. And he's allowed me, and I'm very blessed in the fact that I'm allowed to grow my entrepreneurial life while still a full-time police officer, and he allows me to have that.
Yeah, it's not some secret that you've got a side business and that you speak and that you
he's so supportive, and we're best friends. But it also, I take care of him. I make sure that he looks good. I make sure that there's no problems in town. I solve problems and
look. I mean, how many? I have friends who are cops, and I have friends who are firefighters, and as I'm sure you well know, because particularly the way the firefighter schedules tend to be, there are a lot of firefighters that have very meaningful careers, what today we call side hustles, but that in some cases they make more money on their side hustle. And my favorite firefighter side hustle story right now is, are you a fight fan at all, Matt?
I've boxed for 25 years. I love MMA. I love it all.
So I'm sure you know Stipe Miocic's story, right? I mean, He's still an active firefighter in Cleveland. I mean, that makes him the greatest heavyweight champion in UFC history just right there, because he's a firefighter and he's the heavyweight champion. Anyway.
That's awesome. Yeah. I actually was going to do a side note. I was trying to raise some money for charity, obviously, and I was going to do a boxing match, and I was trying to get, at 46, I was trying to get licensed to fight one pro fight. I've been fighting my whole life, both in bars and in the streets and then in the gym, but I never had a amateur or pro fight, and I always wanted to do it, and it's on my bucket list. So I tried to get licensed in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and New York, and I got turned down because of my age.
Yeah.
Then I was going to do a amateur charity event, and then I couldn't get anybody to like any venue to any of the casinos or anything to allow me to fight there because of insurance purposes. So that got put on hold. It's still going to happen. I just had to put it on hold a little bit, but I was going to do 10 guys. I was going to do 5 guys and 12 rounds. So there's going to be rotating in every round a new guy.
I would have thought it would have been easy to fight in a Legends smoker. You know, the gyms around here, at least some of them, they have these smokers. And the guys who run the gym sort of put together who's going to fight who, because they want somebody
Right.
who knows both fighters to kind of pair them up equally. And obviously there's weight classes and all that. They're not professional fights. There's headgear. But I mean, they're fights. So I would imagine you could get into a smoker pretty.
Yeah, the problem was I was trying to raise $25,000 and
that's
a
different.
venue that would allow me to have like 500 to 1,000 people. Yeah, so that was the difficult part. I'm still going to figure it out, but I had to put it on hold.
Don't get concussed.
Nah, I've had too many of those. There's not much left to rattle.
So maybe tell me a little bit about entrepreneurship, why you're so driven to start companies and be an entrepreneur, and a little bit about what you're doing there, because you're up to some cool stuff.
Yeah, I never identified myself as an entrepreneur or a businessman. I was resourceful, but I never really thought of myself that way. And then in 2009, I was afforded an opportunity to borrow a significant amount of money that I was never able to pay back, that I didn't think I'd ever be able to pay back, and to buy into Max Out, which is the company that I co-founded. It was originally down in Florida, Winter Park, Florida, and it was going under, and we bought it at a pretty low rate and brought it up to Pennsylvania, rebranded it and all that. And it's a fitness-based business. It was a gym down there with a piece of technology that at the time was revolutionary, and allowed us to do things to the body that no one else can do. And it was amazing and scary. And I borrowed it from another human being who I, by the way, I didn't like. I borrowed $150,000 from him, and I couldn't stand him. And now he's one of my best friends. But and that's a cool story if we have time. But so I started this company with him, and then another guy who ended up who I grew up with, who ended up stealing about $300,000 from us, and he's no longer part of the company. But so it's now
you got to have pretty big stones to steal $300,000 from your former Army.
That's what I thought.
Air Marshal, SWAT cop partner.
Yeah, I never in a million years would have thought it, because I do have a special skill set, and I didn't think that was
special skill set. I love that scene. I love all these Liam Neeson movies.
Oh yeah.
Right, because as a guy who's on the edge of 50, movies where a 65-year-old guy crushes a whole bunch of 25-year-old bad guys that's like fun for me to watch that stuff.
Oh, I love it too. That's one of my favorite scenes ever.
And one of my favorite, that scene in the first Taken movie, right?
Yep.
And that's the line, isn't it?
Yeah, he has a special set of skills. If you hurt my daughter, there'll be no length in which I will go to find you, and I will kill you.
Yeah, and doesn't he say something to the effect of that make me? I have a special set of skills that make me, a really bad idea for guys like you, or something like that, right? It's just, so you're that guy. You have those special skills.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I didn't think he'd steal from me, but he did, and it is what it is. And you live and learn. I wanted to stay in the yard that I felt comfortable in, which was the get shit done yard. And I was the ops guy, and I was, give me tasks, I'll go solve them. But I wasn't the business guy. I didn't have any background in business development or marketing or sales or advertising or any of that stuff. And he was left unchecked, and that was a mistake we made. And you live and learn. But our business, as it's evolved, it started off as I just wanted to own something and be part of something, and I like taking risks, and I always bet on me, and I never thought for a second that I wasn't going to be successful, because I always believed that I have enough patience and determination and passion to overcome just about anything. Well, we hit bottom 2 or 3 times, almost hit bankruptcy a few times, and things weren't good. And during the lowest point, when my partner took the money, I went to my other partner who I hated, And I said, listen, we have choices. I have built the system of what our business is as far as the operations component. And I said, I put in nuke switches along the way. And at any point in time, I can flip a switch and it's gone. I said, and you won't get your money back. You can come sue me. I got nothing. I said, or you can become my partner and you can help me build this and save it. And over time, he chose that. And over time, he and I have developed a very, very tight bond. And I do just about anything for him. And Jason is a phenomenal business partner. And, it doesn't hurt that he's the financier too. And I've been very protective of his money. And I only ask for money when I'm 100% certain it's going to be good for us. And over the course of 9 years, it's been a series of great moments where we actually do a lot of great things in our facility. I work with people with neurological, neuromuscular disease, and I'm helping people walk that haven't walked in decades. And, it's having that connectivity with another human being who has no hope and who's left for to just be however they were with MS or strokes or aneurysms or paralysis or whatever their situation is. And then all of a sudden I'm able to help them because I have a piece of technology that no one else has. And that's a powerful feeling. And that's what has kept this business thriving, is because we have that ability to do that.
Yep. And so you're 9 years into your entrepreneurial journey. And when did you start giving speeches and sort of become a motivational a motivational speaker? Yeah.
Yeah, that was, and it's like I said, everything in my life has been is a part of the journey. There's nothing that's independently just sort of been. They've all sort of led to another. And with Max Out, we started working with kids and doing strength training for athletes, and when you start to get their trust and show them that what you're doing with their body and their performance in their sport, all of a sudden you got that trust factor. And then I started realizing that they were talking to me about everything in their life, every problem they got, every issue in their life, and now all of a sudden I'm their mentor. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, well, what can I do to help these kids that I'm not doing right now with the physical side? And the biggest thing for me was I've been a leader my whole life. I've trained leaders. I know exactly how to, with my understanding of human behavior and body language, I understand how to hit the trigger points for people to get them moving. And I wanted to create an opportunity for kids to become leaders. And one of the things I've learned as a cop is that 99% of the world's problem can be traced back to some really shitty parenting. And I can't control what's going on in their home, but I can control what's happening in my gym when they come to me. And I think I can control what's happening when they get to schools. And so I started the leadership program at Max Out, and I had probably 15 to 20 kids in it, and they were doing amazing. And their parents were loving it, and everybody was talking great about it. And then I started to think I'm really a prick for just keeping it for the people that can afford to come to my gym, because we're personal training. So it's not like $10.99 a month. And so I said, I'm going to go out and offer it to our local schools to offer this in an abbreviated way, but what I'm doing to them. And that started about 5 years ago. And I've been doing leadership training in schools for free for 4.5 years. And then I realized with my police job, my kids, my wife, my Max Out, and everything else that's placed upon me, I ran out of hours. And doing stuff for free, I couldn't do more of that for free. And I had to make a choice. And I needed to decide where was I going to put my attention and my passion. And I really love what I do when I speak. I mean, I really love it. And I feel like I'm able to share something that's meaningful, and I can help somebody not just today, but down the road for the rest of their life by giving them tools that they may not have today. And the only way that I know how to do that is in schools, because I believe, when I go in and talk to kids and I ask them about how many bullying classes have you had or assemblies, and they all raise their hand, and yet there's still a shit ton of bullying going on. And you touched on it earlier that we've allowed the
I want to interrupt you on the bullying thing.
Yep.
So when you're 8 years old, sometimes you just need to punch a guy in the face, don't you?
Absolutely. That's how I did it.
Yeah, that's how I did it too. And I grew up in a situation where I didn't know if I was going to fight today or not.
Yep.
So I get all the stuff on bullying. I get it. And I don't want our kids to grow up in a world of bullying. And I understand why schools say zero tolerance on violence. I understand that. But listen, when you're an 8, 10, 12-year-old boy, sometimes you need to get into a fight. And I think, and maybe this makes me, a crazy old bastard, but I think if you take that out, like you take man training out of being a boy when you take that out.
Yeah.
So I don't get this no violence thing. I understand where it's coming from, but every once in a while, boys are going to have to fight. Just let them fight. Am I crazy? Am I turning into that crazy old man?
No. So we have a rule in my house, and this is, I'm not. I don't walk into schools and say, "Hey, you two, settle this out in the yard." I don't do that, but I do tell my son, and I say, "Listen, we're Cubblers. I've trained you to be a Cubbler. This has been my entire life's purpose, is to send you out into the world equipped to use my name and to make it greater." And we have never once in our lives, my life or my son's life, started a fight, but we've never not finished one. And that's our rule. You will never start one, but you will never back down from one, and you will finish it. And when I go into schools and I talk to these kids, and what I figured out is that if I can get a kid to believe in something about themselves that makes them have worth, whatever that is, whether it's music, whether it's academics, whether it's sports, whether it's their personality, their charm, or their charisma, whatever it is, if I can help a kid identify what that is and grow it and then spread it into a bunch of different ways, I can create a room full of leaders, and I can change a generation, and I can take what was once a victimization culture and turn it into a leadership culture. And one of the ways I do that, and I probably shouldn't say it because somebody will steal it, but whatever, I've created a program for high school strength coaches. And if you ask any athlete in college, and there's not a lot of high school strength coaches across the country, it's a very low equipped job title. Not many have it. There's a lot of coaches that think they are, but they're not. But if you ask a college athlete who their most important coach was, they're going to say their strength coach, because they put them in uncomfortable positions. They have them be accountable, have responsibility, get your lifting. If you didn't perform, it's because you didn't do well in the gym this week. There's all those things in there.
Yeah.
And if you can get, in most schools, most public schools, 6 out of 10 kids are an athlete on some level.
6 out of 10.
Yep.
So,
and if I can get 60%, with a message and a methodology and a consistent touch point, I'll take 60% of changing the world versus zero today. And to me, it's been dynamically effective getting these kids to buy into a culture of selfless service, of
through the strength coach.
Absolutely.
See, because I listen, something I'm super fascinated by right now, Matt, and I'm very angry about it. And so fascinated makes it sound too happy. I've been thinking for a very long time that we as a society make a lot more good women than men.
You ain't lying.
And I've now started to do the research, because every time one of these things happens, all these mass killings are men, and there's not a single one of them that's a woman. I mean, one in a zillion, but I mean, they're all men.
Mm-hmm.
And where they can't get access to a firearm, they rent a fucking van.
Yep.
And so I've started my own research project, because every time this happens, I say to myself, what the fuck is wrong with men? And so I've gone to work on it. I'm trying to figure out actually what the fuck is wrong with men, because I think things are worse than they were and getting worser.
Well, I think, and I don't know what you've discovered, but just through what I've learned through being a cop and what I see in homes and what I see when I talk to kids that are in trouble and I have them in a room and I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on in the world. Women don't necessarily need a dad. They don't necessarily need to have that person to show them how to be a woman, because the dad doesn't really do that anyways. And most of the time, moms have their kids, even if they're not supposed to and they shouldn't. They have their kids. There are very few men anymore that are raising their children to be men. And the dad component is what's missing. And even if there is a dad, he's probably a shitty one, and he's not doing his job. And I think that if you look back, and I've done a lot of studying on mass shootings and serial killers and terrorism, obviously, and the mental illness component, there is some component of that that's factual, but I do believe that that's,
It turns out on mass killings, mental illness is not seen as a major contributing factor. That is just,
and I didn't think it would.
Most mass killers are not considered to be mentally ill.
I'm going to turn the light on real quick, see if I think I'm getting dark here because it's a little later here. Let me see.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can get this data quickly.
Is that too bright?
Hold on. No, that's fine.
Okay, good.
I have data about the percentage of kids that are raised. Shit. I wonder if I'll be able to find it. Well, listen to this stat. This is from Salon.com. Of all people in America, adult white heterosexual men have the fewest friends. Most adult males in the United States don't make a friend past college.
Wow.
Yeah, no. When you start to paint the picture of what's going on, it's terrifying.
That's crazy. I would have never thought.
Boys are 2.5 times more likely to drop out of high school than girls. I'm not going to. Oh, here it is. Raising boys without men. This is exactly what I wanted to find. So this is from. This is a government article, I believe. Households where both a mother and a father are present. Guess what percentage of the United States grow up in a household with a mother and a father in the house?
It's under 50%.
It's 23.5%.
Wow.
And the other point that this article makes, and there's a lot written about this that I've now found. So boys, not only do they grow up without a father present, they also grow up without men present. So when you and I were kids, the mix of male to female teachers was roughly 50-50.
Yeah.
And today it's roughly 80% female.
Women. Yep.
And so I'm not saying anything about women, but what I am saying to your point is boys grow up in a world without men, and they're not allowed to express some of their boyness. And it starts to get really, really bad. The picture of the modern American male is a terrifying one as I'm discovering it.
And it's, I think, and it all, listen, facts don't lie. Realities is that, as a police officer, everything that you just said is, you see it every day. It's not uncommon to have, no dad there or a stepdad who's got zero connection with their kids and doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
And for me, when I mentor, I love coaching girls because girls learn the fastest. They're the easiest to coach. They're the easiest to train. Everything you tell them, they do to pinpoint precision because they're pleasers. Boys are always the hardest. But what I want to do is create an environment where, with what I'm doing with my speaking, with what I'm doing going into schools, is there has to be someone from the outside, because teachers can't do it anymore. And that, let's be honest, they're not teaching. When my mom taught, when we were in school, every teacher had their requirements for what they had to teach, but how they taught it was up to them. How they delivered the message was up to them. And that's why, I can remember every teacher I ever had because of the greatness of what I learned from them. Kids today, they don't have a teacher that means anything because the teachers have to go through basically the script, which is dictated by the state, which says in order to get this standardized test score, you got to teach this stuff like this in order for us to have our state funding.
No, I pray for a world that where we move to strength-based teaching.
I agree.
But that's.
But if I can get in there, and positively create an environment where at least a male-dominated figure. I'm 6'3", 250 pounds. I cast a shadow.
You're a big-ass SWAT cop. You're a big, scary-looking cop.
But I smile.
Yes.
Which softens it a little bit.
Yes.
But I'm trying to create that environment so that kids aren't going out into the world. So I can be a Chris Carlisle on a greater scale to a bunch of kids across the country.
Yep.
And that's my mission.
Well, and I love you for it. And of course, we want to raise legendary young ladies. Of course we do. And it's very, very clear that there's something really fucking wrong with the way we, as a culture, are creating boys, because they grow up to be these fucked up men.
I agree. And one of the things I learned, and this is just a quick segue, is when I'm dealing with neurological, neuromuscular patients, as a society, we treat every symptom. That's all we do. Whether you have a headache or this, everybody gets a pill for something. There's always a symptom that's being treated. No one's really giving a shit about the cause of the problem. And when I'm dealing with people with neuromuscular disease or neurological disease, if their leg's not working, me moving their leg isn't going to make their leg work. I have to find out why their leg's not working.
Yep.
And finding that puzzle and solving that riddle is what drives me every day. I literally think of new ways that I can try to create a stimulus so that leg works. And when I deal with kids, I try to figure out why they're fucked up, or why they're having a bad time, or why they have no self-confidence. And I try to get them, without me telling them why, to figure it out on their own through a bunch of series of questions and leading them down the path that they need to go down in order to figure out who they are, what their strengths are, do the things they're good at, stop doing the stuff they suck at, and build a life where they can find success every single day. I don't care what anybody says. If you do stuff you suck at all the time, you're going to do nothing but get frustrated and maybe become marginally less sucky.
Yeah. Well, and that might be a good place to land this one. Anything else on your mind, Matt?
No, man. I'm writing another book.
When does it come out?
My mom. I'm writing it over the course from Christmas to Christmas. So Christmas 2018 will be the end of the book, but it's a dedication to my mom. Like I said, she has Alzheimer's, and it's sort of a book dedicated to her. It's a bunch of love stories and notes that I wrote to her. So that's the next book. And I have with Max out, we have 2 new patents, and we got a couple of years ago, and we're launching the new device this summer. And we partnered with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are going to be our launch partner. And
wow,
so things are really looking good there. And the goal is to blow that up, and then hopefully license or sell the patents, and allow me to get out of police work and go do speaking full time. That's kind of my.
Is that the ultimate mission?
Yeah, I gotta get rid of one of my jobs. So, but I can't neglect putting food on the table. So we're gonna.
Yeah,
drive on. We got.
George W. Bush said, "You gotta keep food on your family."
Yep. Listen, man, I can tell you what, this has been. It doesn't feel like we just talked for an hour and a half. We covered a lot of bases, and I can tell why you're so talented and why you're so successful at this whole podcast thing, because you make it enjoyable and you make it simple.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. There's this word that you never hear in the English language anymore, and the word is conversationalist. Mm. And I didn't know it when we started Legends and Losers, because for me it was more the way I thought about it then was I'm just a curious person, and now this word conversationalist, it's like, you know what? People used to aspire to be a good conversationalist. People used to not have smartphones, and they would actually look each other in the fucking eye over a scotch, a beer, a coffee, or a nice walk, or a nice fire, or whatever it is you like to do, and sit down and talk to each other. And, many of us, myself included, had lost that. And so it's an interesting thing to say to yourself, hey, I have a commitment to being a good conversationalist. I'm curious. I want to know about your life. I want to understand some of these decisions. I will forever be fascinated by what people do at these moments of truth. I will be forever fascinated in a discussion called how do you design your life, and then actually execute on that design. And so it's just awesome to be able to have these conversations. And you're a fascinating guy, Matt, and such a committed guy and such an open guy. And that's the other thing. It's like, people have this impression of what a SWAT cop is, right? And you're not trying to be fucking John Rambo or some other, or Magnum PI or any other character of a cop or a tough guy, an army guy. You're talking about your brother, and you're talking about your parents, and you're talking about Chris, your mentor, and love and life, and like it's a very powerful thing when a powerful man in a position of power who's done the kinds of things that you do says, here's who I really am behind this badge, behind this uniform.
Well, it's a you can thank my mother. She is the single most amazing mother / father I've ever had. I learned how to work because of her. She worked 3 jobs my whole life. I knew how to sacrifice. I knew how to love. I knew how to say I love you. I know how to hug. I know how to care and comfort. And I learned all those things from her. And, my stepfather, when he came into the picture when I was 12, he's a pastor. And so I learned my faith through him. And I understood the value of connecting with God. And while I lost it for a while, after my brother died, I was able to reconnect. And it's been a guiding force for me. And being able to see my future and see my path and know where I'm going and not have to sell my soul to get there and not change who I am in order to fit into a box of public speaker or mastermind this or whatever that. I'm not going to be that. I'm going to be me. I'm going to do me. I'm going to tell my story. I'm going to become a leader of leaders, and I'm going to do what I do the way that I know how to do it, which is, with passion, with effort, with commitment, with authenticity, and with, a little bit of love in my heart and a tear or two on the stage.
Well, Matt, you're awesome. Thank you so much. You've been incredibly generous with your time, and stay legendary, my friend.
All right, brother. Thank you so much for having me, man.
Thank you.
Whew. What a conversation, and what a life. And it's incredible, so many people are so guarded. And for Matt to be so open and so real and so raw about so many things, it was a treat having that conversation. If you know somebody who would be inspired by Matt, why not email them this episode right now? And it makes a giant difference to us if you share Legends and Losers on social media, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or whatever other social media platforms you love. And if you have 2 seconds, it makes a giant difference to everybody at Legends and Losers if you write us a review, and it helps other people find us. All right. We would like to thank A Brother's Love by our friend and guest today, Matt Cubbler. Check it out on Amazon.com. It's a great read, A Brother's Love. The new book from Heather Clancy and I, Niche Down, it's about ready. Go to nichedownbook.com and subscribe, and we will send you the foreword written by our friend and guest on episode 91, the incredible Hal Elrod. Equity Directory. If you're in the startup ecosystem, check out equitydirectory.com. OneLifeFullyLive.org. Dream, plan, and live your best life. We're the nonprofit trying to make a difference. Check us out, OneLifeFullyLive.org. Our good friends at Verve Coffee, the official coffee roasters of Legends and Losers. This is West Coast craft coffee like you've never had it unless you've had Verve. Check them out at vervecoffee.com. The amazing book from our dear friend and guest, John Vroman. Check it out. The Front Row Factor. Transform your life with the art of moment making. And speaking of our good friends, John Bergov's company, Flourishing Leadership Institute. If you haven't heard episode 33 with John, it'll make you pee your pants because it it made John pee. But I digress. Flourishing Leadership Institute is an incredible organization that helps facilitate transformational change in your business. Check out lead2, the number 2, flourish.com. John's Crazy Socks, the official sock supplier to Legends and Losers. We have the Legends and Losers socks, and we're going to tell you how you can get a pair. Check out johnscrazysocks.com. And the incredible people at Habitat for Humanity, a global nonprofit working in local communities across all 50 states and over 70 countries to help build houses for people. All right, we need to remind you that this oddcast is a sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and we'd love it just a little bit extra if you shared the shit out of it. All rights do remain disturbed. This oddcast cast? One day I'm going to learn how to talk. This oddcast was produced in a studio that clearly contains nuts. Don't forget the sage words of David Lee Roth. Hey man, that suit is you. In the event of business bullshit, take 2 Legends and Losers and tweet us in the morning. Don't be lame. Get out of the passing lane. Also, support our local law enforcement. Don't forget that our law enforcement suits up every day to risk their lives to keep our lives safe. Buy pasteurized, free-range eggs only. Beware the fine print. Watch out for any guy who says, hey, dude, hold my beer. Try to be a podcast legend and introduce 2 people you love to 2 podcasts you love. Thank you, Dandy Candy. I love you, Mom and Dad. And hey, Colin, this oddcast really ties the room together, doesn't it? Today, our deepest apologies go out to Marcus Rust, CEO and owner of Roseacre Farms. Sorry, Marcus, we just ran out of time for you. That's it, my friends. Thank you so much for investing your life with us, and we'll see you again soon on Legends and Losers.